Hey guys, welcome to Irish Medieval History, and this week I'd like to cover the topic that is the Irish influence within The Witcher. For anyone who doesn't know, the Witcher series is originally based off a book series that would eventually end up becoming a bunch of video games, and then right now Netflix now own the rights to make a series from the books. So the Witcher series covers a lot of stuff right now. With that, when I had been analysing the Witcher series, I had noticed that there was a lot of Gaelic influence in there. For you guys who don't know, the Witcher series is actually based on fantasy. It's meant to be complete fantasy, but I do find that it has been heavily influenced. In particular, don't get me wrong on this, Slavic culture from Poland in particular. I did find it was very much very Slavic. Um, I don't specialize in Slavic folklore, so I won't be covering that today. What I do specialize in is Irish medieval history, and I do have a massive interest in folklore because folklore is how my ancestors had seen the world. My grandmother had taught me the folklore that I know today, and I had re-supported that again by going off into university and educating myself still further with different people's interpretation of folklore. And that needs to be highlighted before we get into this, because when I'm covering this, you will have your own interpretation of folklore. And I always find, even when I had highlighted that in my last video, there were still people who had their interpretation of folklore and were very passionate about it. And I don't get me wrong, I'm very passionate about my folklore, and I think you should protect your own folklore as well, your own interpretation of folklore, because I want to know the view of people who lived in the medieval period. In particular, when the Witcher series is set for this video, which is between 1263 to 1272. Now, there is a lot of changes that happened in Eastern Europe at the time that influenced the Witcher series. However, I'm not delving into that today because what I'm interested in is the Gaelic culture that appears in the Witcher series. And as I said earlier, the Witcher series is set between 1263 to 1272, and that's very important because in the islands that I feel like have influenced the Witcher series, which is between Skellig Michael all the way up to the Orkney Islands, you have a certain war going on called the Scottish-Norwegian War. Now, the war itself I will cover in a completely separate video, but within that, at the time, from about 793, if not earlier, you had a lot of immigration coming in from the Scandinavian world into the various islands, from the Orkneys all the way up to the Skellig Islands. And that's very important because originally you had all those islands were occupied by both Pictish and Gaelic people, and when the Scandinavian people would come in, they would have a massive influence in that area. And I feel the writer had gone into that area specifically. However, I felt like any good fantasy historian, he'd pick the match, the stuff he liked from about 793 all the way up to the 1600s. I felt like he did pick a lot of history that he liked between Celtic cultures, we call it today, Gaelic cultures, it was called back in the day, and Scandinavian culture that had influenced those islands later on. Also, we can see in the Witcher series, we can see dwarves and elves. Dwarves and elves are very interesting because they don't actually originate between any Celtic culture that I know, neither Gaelic nor from the Welsh side. So this is clearly, in my opinion, was more of an outside influence coming in, and it does appear more of a Scandinavian influence into Scotland. That seems to be the it's mostly highlighting, and as you know yourself, that influence would have came in from Norway and gone down, well, would have came in from the Scandinavian world down inwards, and they would have brought the idea of dragons and dwarves and elves into the Shetland Islands, the Orkney Islands, so on and so forth. And they would have brought that into the islands just off of Scotland and Ireland, which is very interesting in itself. The next thing that also they have in the video game are wolves. The reason why you see wolves in the game, although they do cover a Slavic version of the wolves, They also slightly indicate as well the wolves that come in from a more of Scandinavian Gaelic view. Uh, it's been done to death already, is the whole view of the Scandinavian. So I really don't need to get into that. What I will do is just quickly highlight all the videos that have been endlessly made on Scandinavian werewolves, idea, and folklore, which is mostly the Berserker link. Now, I don't know what people's arguments on the Berserker link, and it's not very important, but what is important is that kind of Norse Gael culture link that's there, or what we like to call the Scoto-Picto Scandinavian, and also the Hiberno Scandinavian link, if we're going academic there. Quite wild. But basically, what werewolves are in Gaelic culture is that back in the day, you would have had war bands, and most of these war bands are made up of young people between the ages of 14 to 25. And in particular, you would have had a lot of rich kids, believe it or not, that would have joined these war bands. And it was kind of the whole attitude of, boys will be boys attitude. And they would have gone around the countryside acting like Vikings in a way. They would have gone around raiding, attacking each other, attacking rival tuats. They would have and they would have been pushed onto the borders of society. So they lived in the borders of their kingdom, and that's where they hung around. And they attacked anybody who were wandering around the borders in their society. And so the idea from the common people is that they were werewolves, especially at nighttime. They would put on animal skin and they would behave like werewolves. And so that's where the whole idea of werewolves would have been part of Gaelic society. Now there's people now that can go into far more detail than I can, and I can easily link those videos below that really get into the depths of it. Colin, that I already had in the show that covered the Fenian war bands, he's very good at covering this stuff. That's actually, I'm sure that's what his speciality is right now, that he's been delving right into. The next character I'm going to look at is the Banshee. Now, there's actually, surprisingly enough, the majority of female entities, female ghosts that appear in the game are in fact of Slavic. They're very much a Slavic background. However, I've seen a few people online make a comparison to the Banshee, and I sort of disagree with this, but I wanted to cover the Banshee anyway, and I will be covering the Banshee in other videos because I had a few Banshee stories passed down to me from my own grandmother, and so my own family is very much linked in with the Banshee. The Banshee is very important in Gaelic culture. Throughout all of the medieval period, a lot of families would have had their own Banshee, which is very interesting because the Banshee herself is related to the goddess the Morrigan, who is a Celtic deity from Celtic paganism, in particular in Ireland. So in Ireland we had a goddess who was called the Morrigan. Now, modern pagans will give her titles such as the pagan goddess of lust and war, and various other female titles and stuff. And that's not Celtic paganism. That's in fact more of a Roman idea that's brought in, that's labeling her as the goddess of, various titles and stuff that you see online. Like, she seems to be the goddess of everything now, when in fact she was just the goddess, and she covers a lot of stuff. But this idea that she is a goddess of multiple things, that's a very modern idea. In reality, Morrigan didn't cover any of that stuff. She was just a goddess, Banshee is the Christianized version of the Morrigan, and every family, every major noble family wanted to have their own Banshee. So they would hire, who we were talking about earlier, the Shanachie, to tell stories about their family's Banshee. And in fact, when you had Normans who would have immigrated into Ireland, invaded, they themselves, when they became the Hiberno-Normans, I'm not talking about the Anglo-Normans now, I'm talking about the Normans who came in and eventually became Gaelicized, they themselves would have adopted their own Banshee. They would have gotten their own Shanachie, and they would themselves, their Shanakees, would have told of their family's Banshee, because a family having a Banshee is the most Gaelic you can get, because that's your link then to the Celtic pagan past. So every family wanted their own Banshee, and there is many different forms of the Banshee depending on what family you're from. My family, on my mother's side, the Bridget side, they have their own Banshee, and their Banshee only calls in when a female member of our family is going to die. So when a female family member is going to die, the Banshee will hang around outside the house, screaming, roaring, and making all kinds of sounds. And then when the person has passed away, the Banshee will go away as well, right? So that's how the Banshee works in my family. I love this stuff, by the way. So if you have a Banshee in your family, or you think you're related to a Banshee story, please tell me below, because I absolutely love all the stories to do with the Banshee. I find the Banshee absolutely fascinating, and I would absolutely love to know what your background is, right? Finally, also I want to move on to the white women. You see a lot of witches in the Witcher series, and the witches basically help the main character, who's called Garrett. And Garrett, basically, he's kind of like a folklore hunter kind of person. He would go into a village in the medieval period, get to know the local village, find out if there's a monster hunting them and stuff, and he'd make the monster go away. And there are various forms of these people that would exist all the way up to the 1800s and stuff. But one person that would help out villagers that had problems and stuff in their local area. In Poland, I think they would have been recognized as witches. Well, that's what the Christian faith was branding them as anyway. If you're Polish or from Eastern Europe, or you just happen to know this history as well, please tell me, because it's out of my field, but I am insanely interested in all of this, especially to do with medieval history. I absolutely love medieval history, so please tell me away. Love to know. But in Ireland, all the way up to 1969, if not further up still, you still have versions of women today that are very helpful to society, is the white women. And what the white women did is, if you had a problem in your village, let's say you had a headache even, or if there was this ghost hunting you, you would go and visit the white woman, or the white women. And local people, a lot of local people would know where she was, or maybe she had to move at the time or whatever, because obviously the church didn't like her, so she would live in the outskirts of society. And so when people needed to go and find the white woman, there was always a local person who knew where she was. And so somebody would, like, a decent fella that was in the village, somebody who was nice, and that nice person would always know where the white woman was. And so they would go up to, say, Michael. No, they would go up to Michael and say, Michael, where's the white woman? And Michael would turn around and he would say, I don't know, but I heard of a friend that she may be down in the woods down below, down in the deep ends of it, if down next to where, the mud place is, where Billy was drinking last week. And so that was basically telling them where the white woman was, because that person would have like a pain in her head, or their wife would have various problems and stuff. So they would go and visit the white woman. And today we would call the white woman a pharmacist. That's pretty much what they are today, like pharmacists. So they go down for various herbs or find various cures, and it's exactly the same role that witches play in the game, the video game, and the books and stuff, and the TV series called The Witcher. They were witches, like. So one character I want to cover now is Gunter OD, and you may have noticed straight away the OD part, Odim, as his correct pronunciation is. And a lot of people look at it, and the only thing they can work out is that Odim is a kind of play on words of an insult to God, which is, if you get the Odim part, it's dim, as in, not so bright. You're not very bright. You're very dim. You're not very smart, is what basically what it means. And if you get his main letters God, it's dumb God. And then if you play around with his spelling again in French, it highlights stupid God. So it's meant to be his name is meant to be a pure swing off the God up in heaven, right? So it highlights that he may be God. However, fitting more to the actual character he's really based on within Irish folklore is actually Stingy Jack O'Lantern. And Stingy Jack O'Lantern comes from a very violent period, which actually happens to be the period of The Witcher. The main stories in itself originate around the 18th century. I think the earliest one is around 1550, which tells the backstory to lanterns that we have today for Halloween. I think other people would disagree because I think there's other folklore backgrounds in Wales and in Scotland and stuff too. What at the time was a turnip. Before we went over to America, it used to be a turnip and then it became a pumpkin. But the backstory of this goes back to Stingy Jack O'Lantern, who was originally a blacksmith who became a marauder bandit, who basically went around that whole area between Scotland and Ireland and the various islands and stuff, basically burning and murdering as he went around the place, jumping on the boat, committing piracy, you name it, the man was a part of it. And one night when he was wandering around a forest drunk, because that's what he did most of the time, he was also known as Drunk Jack. He went wandering around the countryside anyway, and one day he kind of tripped over something. He thought at first maybe it was a body of a dead person or something, because it was all bits and bobs, it wasn't great. And it was a bit of a whiff coming off it as well, a very stinky whiff. And so he got up and he wanted to turn this over to see if it's someone's body that he knew or something like that anyway. Turns it around anyway, and looking at him straight dead in the eye was the devil himself. Like, if you're a marauder, right, you were once a blacksmith as well. Like, it's not even like you could turn around and say, but I had no choice but to become a murderer, that would steal people because I needed the money. He couldn't say that. He was a blacksmith by trade. He chose to become a bandit and live the bandit life. So when he looked the devil in the eye and tried to go, because he's a bad man, and what do bad people do? They always come up with excuses. And he was there in his head trying to come up with an excuse of why he did all these horrific things. And the devil looked him in the eye and smiled. And he said to himself, okay, Jack, this is your time. You're done. And so Jack was like, okay, do I get one last wish before I go? And of course the devil's like, no. What are you giving out wishes for? Like, come on, man. You're coming with me, like, you're on for. And so Jack was like, oh, come on. Please, go down to the tavern. We'll have one last drink, okay? And so the devil was like, yeah, sure. Because the devil was probably in a good mood. I don't know what happened that day, but the devil was in a good mood anyway. And so the devil was like, okay, alright, Jack, if you agree to come with me, I will let you have a last drink. And so that's what Jack and the devil did. They went down to the local tavern, and Jack ordered one of his favourite ales in there, and they both sat down. And obviously Jack is taking his time. He's trying to think up a good plan. He's been thinking up plans now since he first bumped into him. How do I get out of this situation? How do I explain this situation? What can I do, like? And so Jack came up with a good plan while he was getting down to that last bit. Like, when it's coming down and you're like, oh, gee, now I have to get up and pay for a new pint. And that triggered something in Jack's head, right? Jack happened to have a crucifix in his pocket. And the moment he thought about going back to buy another pint, it suddenly all clicked in. Jack didn't have any money on him. So he told the devil, look, I've got no money on him, but do you have any money, devil? And of course the devil didn't have any money. Why would he be buying money? He didn't need food, he didn't need water, and he didn't care about earthly stuff. The devil was into sadism. That was his cup of tea, punishing and pain. That's what got him off. So of course the devil wouldn't have any money on him. So Jack was like, oh, I don't know what to do. how about you turn yourself into a coin? I walk up, so that nothing's rude, and I can go away with you free, right? Turn yourself into a coin. We'll go up, give it to the bartender, right? Then you can turn yourself back into the devil when he's not looking, and then come out back. We'll all be waiting for you, and we can go away. And somehow, and you think to yourself now that there's no way the devil's going to agree to that. But believe it or not, the devil did. The devil was not paying attention that day. I don't know what the crack was. Regardless, he went up. The devil was now in his pocket. And instead of going right up to the bartender, Jack went right outside, with the devil in his pocket, by the way, with the crucifix, went right outside the front door and continued walking. Just started walking away. The devil's in his pocket going, "What are you doing, Jack? What's going on, Jack? What are you... Jack, come on now. What's going on now?" And Jack is there giggling away, laughing like there's no tomorrow. They walk right into the forest where he can, left a few of his drinks and stuff, and he goes back to drinking, and Jack is laughing away. And he's telling the devil, "Look, I've got you trapped now because you've put yourself right next to a crucifix, and I know fully well that that's where the power of God is, in my pocket. So I tricked you into going to my pocket." Now, you're probably listening to me going, "That's not much of a trick. Like, the devil, for all his age," but it worked. The devil was in a good mood that day. What can I say? And the devil probably got overconfident. He probably thought, a drunken bandit. Of course he could outthink a drunken bandit. People always underestimate, criminals and stuff. They don't realise how smart you have to be to go undetected in society and stuff. There's a lot to it. A lot of people do underestimate the dumb bandit, but there's a lot more to it. Regardless, this dumb bandit now had the devil in his pocket, and he basically told the devil, and the devil rejected him the first time, but he agreed with him the second time. And that is that if Jack was to let the devil out, he'd have to agree to giving him 10 years off, right? And so Jack agreed to. Sorry, the devil agreed to. So the devil agreed to give Jack 10 years off, until one day the devil would come back from him. And so in those 10 years, Jack would have to come up with a new plan. So 10 years goes by, and the devil appeared right in front of Jack, outside his little cottage. Now, you'd think with an extra 10 years he would have done himself a few favours, but it appeared Jack didn't. Jack was there sipping away on his drink. And when the devil appeared, Jack must have been having a bad day, because Jack was just, the head that was down, it's just like, what can you do, sipped away in his drink a wee bit more, and he puts it down. And Jack says to himself, you can hear the food by his stomach, by the way, is growling, and Jack is like, "You don't mind go outside to have myself an apple?" And the devil, like a fool, by the way, after being fooled the first time, like a fool, agrees to it. Like, maybe the devil was just having a great day that day too, I don't know. But you think after being tricked the first time, that Satan wouldn't have agreed the second time, but he did. And so Jack goes outside, climbs up to the tree to go get himself an apple, and the devil walks him out, because the devil just has a feeling at this point, there's something not right here, there's just something not right. So the devil walks out with him, and the devil parks himself right now. You know what the ladder is going up to the tree? The devil parks himself right there, and Jack starts smirking to himself at this point, like, "Oh boy, I have you now, I got you." And the devil's really worried, the devil's freaking out, "What's going on here, Jack? What have you done now?" Giving him all the bad words and all that stuff, yourself. And Jack climbs from the tree and jumps off the tree, fucking wrecks up his legs, for a bang off the ground, but Jack don't care. Jack's alive, right? And not only is he alive, but the devil is trapped. The devil can't get out where the tree is, right? So the area around the tree, the devil can't get out. He's pushing against the wall. What have you done? He put crucifixes around the tree, so the devil can't get out. The devil's stuck again. And so Jack is laughing away for a good bit. He goes inside, gets his drink that he was still in the middle of drinking, comes out, laughs with the devil a bit more, makes fun of him. They have a wee bit of a chat, and then eventually the devil calms down. And he's like, right, devil, I'll make an agreement with you, right? If you never, ever, ever come after my soul, I'll let you out. And so the devil's thinking to himself, I'm gonna have one for you. I'm gonna get you at the end. And we never have your soul, but I'm gonna get you back. I'm gonna get you back, Kyle. That's what the devil said to Jack, and Jack was like, I don't care, like, you're never having my soul, so what problem is it to me, like, you know? Just the devil, like, I know I was saying a few seconds ago that Jack, he's not that dumb, but he's also not that smart as well, like, because you don't say things like that to the devil. Regardless, years goes on, Jack continues to commit sins, of course he does, because it's Jack, like, and Jack eventually dies, you know, and he's got a bit of money now, and this is where the nickname comes from, Stingy Jack, because he doesn't, he's a bandit, of course he's not going to spend any money on the locals and stuff that he probably robbed, you know. Regardless, he dies an old man. His soul goes up to heaven, allegedly, right? He goes up to St. Peter, who's waiting in the gates. St. Peter knows who Stingy Jack is. Everybody in Ireland and Scotland knows who Stingy Jack is. And so Stingy Jack goes up to St. Peter and he's like, go on there, let me in, boy. It's me, Stingy Jack. Do you know yourself, like, we'll have a laugh, boy. Every night's gonna be like karaoke night. It's gonna be amazing, boy. And St. Peter's thinking to himself, every night's not gonna be like karaoke night. I don't even like karaoke. Get out of it, like. And so St. Peter, the man on the gate, like, does not tolerate any of this, and so he gets rid of Jack, kicks him out from the patio of heaven, or whatever you want to call it. You know, those clouds in front of the gates of heaven. Just throws him off, and he banishes his soul from that whole spot. So St. Peter will never have to worry about him again. He's banished from that whole area. And Jack goes back down, and Jack's like, oh, what do I do now? Like, I'm just wandering around the earth. He wanders around for a bit, like, but his soul can't rest. While you're on planet Earth, you're in purgatory. You cannot rest. Your soul is lost. And so Stingy Jack is thinking to himself, oh, what do I do now? Like, I need rest. I need to rest my soul. So he decides he'll go down to hell, where the devil is. The devil now at this point, kind of likes Jack. Weirdly enough, I know he'd say, oh, I get back Jack and all this stuff. But at the same time, principles are principles. Although the devil's calmed down now, and there's just something funny about Jack that the devil always kind of liked. So the devil wasn't going to get his own back on Jack. Ish, right? So the Stingy Jack comes up to the devil, right? He's allowed in front through the front gates, walks right into the big palace, which is the devil, with the flames coming out and all this stuff. Goes up into his main room, obviously covered in red silk. You know, what else would the devil be covered in, you know? I could go into more detail, but, you know, we wouldn't be allowed on this. But anyway, goes right up to the devil. And he says, can I come and rest here? You know, that's a smirk into his rest in hell. I tell you something, right? Since I always liked you, Jack, I have to be straight with you. You're not allowed in hell. We made that agreement. You made that agreement yourself. It was your idea to start with, so don't even take it out on me. But Jack, I like you. I've always liked you. So I'll make you a deal. You can stay on Earth. Soul, you know, but I'll give you a lantern to light your way, because like Jack isn't, because Jack's dead. He's like in that purgatory world that's not very bright. It's dark. It's like Earth. Everything is exactly the way Earth is, but it's very dark. So the devil says to him, I'll make an agreement with you. Because we're buddies. I'll give you a lantern. And this is where the story originates from. Jack O'Lantern, that's his new nickname now. And Jack O'Lantern is given a turnip with a candle in it to light up his way through purgatory. Yeah, if I die, I never want to bump into Stingy Jack O'Lantern, that's for sure. And so Jack O'Lantern goes between the two worlds now of purgatory, our own place of earth. And basically what Jack O'Lantern does is exactly what the character in the other game does. I'll put his name there again. And that's the actual connection between the two, the folklore in the game and in real life. And maybe there is a bit of devil influences in there, but there's actually a lot of jumping Jack in there and stuff that you see, because there's not just one version of Jack O'Lantern, there's like 1,000 different versions of the same story, which really starts to multiply in the 1800s. And there's also like there's a dozen different versions of the Lantern story, but the one that's in Ireland that's literally centered around the Scottish War of Independence, which we don't even know, not the Scottish War of Independence, the 13th century, and we don't even know if it's fact or not, is from Jack O'Lantern, who supposedly lived 700 years, which would have been the 13th century. So your guess is as good as mine, as if that was the foundation to it, but it sounds like it is. So that's the one I'm running with for this one. But I hope it's entertaining, even if it's wrong. I hope it's entertaining for you. And also I hope you learned a thing or two about Irish medieval history. Hope you enjoyed the video. And yeah, of course, we have merchandise. You know what YouTuber doesn't these days. The thing that makes our merchandise differently is it's focused more on actual Irish medieval history rather than just, you know, for the channel itself. You know, you're not going to get a picture of me with my face going peekaboo like other YouTubers have. It's straight up, we're going to have the family in. We're going to make it as historically accurate as possible. That's why a lot of it can be slow. Plus, we're insanely busy right now, both in our own life and in other various stuff. But anyway, that's enough waffle for me. You can also chat to us on Instagram with Irish Medieval History. You can also talk away to us on Twitter with the Irish Medieval History again, and on Facebook on Clans and Dynasties. So there's plenty of places to chat away to us. Hope you enjoyed the video anyway, guys, and all the best. Oh, and one thing, support the channel, subscribe and like if you enjoy anything that's Irish medieval history. There will be more folklore. I'm covering more folklore again next week with a certain video game called Dark Souls, because Dark Souls is very popular, and that covers more folklore set more around the 100 Years' War. So I hope you enjoy that as well. But other than that, thanks very much, guys, and all the best.